So welcome to the People Performance Podcast, where we discuss all things people performance. The People Performance Podcast is made up of 3 series. First up, we have the Leader Lounge episodes with me, the founder. Then we have the guest interview episodes. And finally, we have the performance episodes delivered by the T2 consultants. If after listening to our podcast, you want to get in touch with T2 about anything we do, please contact us at help@trans2performance.com. You can stream or listen to our podcast on all the usual platforms available. So for now, sit back, tune in, and enjoy the People Performance Podcast. So welcome to another Leader Lounge episode with me, Martin Johnson, the founder of T2. In the last episode, I talked about the science behind all human motivation, and we talked a lot about survival, reproduction, and purpose, and sort of concluded that all human motivation, therefore, is either towards pleasure and reward or away from pain and danger. For this episode, I'm going to talk about how that manifests in the 3 types of mindset that we can be in at any one time. At T2, we call them the 3 psychological states. And when we work with clients and individuals, we start to get them to understand how they work and where they spend the most time and which of these 3 states are more dominant in them, and how they can learn to switch between these states when the situation requires them to do so. So what do I mean by this? The 3 states that we believe humans can be in at any one time as a result of that evolutionary reason, survival, reproduction, and purpose, and therefore all human beings are motivated towards pleasure or away from pain, are the neutral state, the challenge state, or the threat state. So I'll say that again. The psychological states we can be in at any one time could be a neutral state, a challenge state, or a threat state. So let's start with the neutral state. As it sounds, the neutral state is an even-keel state. It is where you are avoiding pain and seeking comfort. You are busy doing nothing or busy being in a state of calm. You are neither experiencing challenge or pressure, stress, or duress. You're not facing extreme adversity. You're also not experiencing triumph and elation. You are even keel. It's your neutral state. So think about this. This could be in your personal life, you're taking the dog for a walk. You're sat with a glass of wine. You're reading a book. You're sat watching a film with your children or just watching the kids play. You're socializing with friends, just something which makes you nice and even, and you're neither experiencing extreme triumph or elation, and you're not experiencing any challenge, stress, duress, or adversity. So the neutral state plays a really vital role in our lives, because if we are governed by pleasure and pain, survival and purpose, if we was trying to do that every nanosecond of every day, it is overwhelming, incredibly tiring, and the amount of stress and pressure on the body would be too much to sustain. So something would give mentally and physically. So the neutral state is really important because it's a really important state for you to be calm, present, and the brain starts to switch off, not switch off, but the system of the brain starts to calm down. And you start to operate in your DMN, the default mode network. And the reason that's important is because the brain goes, hang on a second, we don't need to be processing lots of information here. We don't need to be critically thinking. We don't need to be operating at speed. There's no problems to solve. There's nothing to really focus in on. So the brain adjusts to this and starts to go into the DMN. Now, the reason that's important in neutral state is because this is the state where you will start to focus inward and not on your outside world, right? You will start to focus on things like reflection, memories. You'll start having ideas. You'll start thinking about the future, planning. You'll start reflecting on the past or the present. You'll connect with yourself. You'll connect with how you feel, how things are going right now. And the DMN's really good at this because it's the state in which, imagine you're sat at the beach bar with your favorite book, with a gin and tonic on your holiday, and you're thinking about the future or reflecting on your achievements of the past or your family and friends, whatever it might be. It's a wonderful state to be in because you're not under stress or duress. Neither are you highly elated or in triumph. Neutral state has a restorative effect for us human beings. Yes, we know that when we sleep and we go into our unconscious, a fluid will fill the space between the brain and the cranium. There's a small space between your brain and the cranium, and it's like a cleaning fluid. When we go into our state of unconscious and sleep, the brain doesn't need to be working hard anymore. So this fluid comes in and gets to work, and it drains in all of the toxin and cleans all of the toxins out of the brain that you've built up during the day. When you wake up in the morning, the fluid drains from the brain. With it goes the toxins. You should be fresh as a daisy, ready to fight the day ahead. However, if you're not a good sleeper and you don't sleep well and you wake up several times through the night, every single time you wake and become conscious, the fluid drains from the brain. You become conscious, you go to the toilet, get a glass of water, play with your phone, whatever it is. When you then go back to sleep an hour later, the fluid has to enter the space in the cranium and start again. Which means if this happens regularly, when you wake up in the morning, you haven't done a full cleaning job. And actually, you wake up feeling groggy with brain fog and you think, pass me the coffee. We've all been there, right? Which is why having children is really challenging because it's broken sleep for a long period of time. So sleep is the major thing that restores our brain back to high energy, detoxified, ready for the day ahead. But neutral state is also important to give your brain a rest during the waking hours. It just starts to calm the system down. And the minute we enter the DMN, the default mode network, we start to be able to slow the processing in the brain down. We're not taking in copious amounts of information, and we're certainly not cognitively thinking and critically thinking. We start to go into reflection, memories, ideas, and visualization. And that is incredibly important. So if you're watching this, my first message to you is neutral state is important. To go into periods of neutral state throughout the day or into the evening is wonderfully restorative for your energy levels, your brain, and your well-being. You can't always be in challenge state and threat state, which we're coming to next. However, one caveat on this, which I'll come back to and I'll circle back to at the end. Too much neutral state time is also not good. We'll come back to that. The second state you can be in is the challenge state mindset. So this is where we are now seeking pleasure and reward, and we're willing to endure a bit of pain, challenge, and discomfort. The challenge state is the state where we can build confidence, competence, experience. We can push ourselves just outside our comfort zone. So if you think about this, anything that doesn't constitute immediate and present danger to your life and is not a neutral state, switch off type of situation is a challenge state, whether that's we're going to work in the morning, we're driving on the motorway, we're giving a presentation at work, we're taking on a sporting challenge or endeavor, whatever it might be, it's a challenge state. It carries some consequence. It carries some stress and duress and challenge, but there's a reward at the end of it for us. There's something in it that will give us purpose at the end. This is a great state to be in. And again, your system comes online. There'll be a healthy release of that adrenaline and cortisol in the challenge state. It will say, switch on, this is important to us. But you will remain focused on what you control and what you want to achieve. That's a really important part of recognizing the difference between a challenge state and a threat state, which I'll come to next. The challenge state says, although there's risk and consequence, although I'm releasing a healthy level of stress, I have got my eyes on the prize. There's something in it for me, and therefore I will remain focused on what I control and what I want to achieve. The challenge state is required for us to take on endeavors at work, our hobbies, in sports, in challenges and endeavors, whatever it is that we're trying to achieve in life, we need to push ourselves into the challenge state. That's where we become focused, eyes on the prize. The brain and body are primed to take on this challenge, and you remain focused on what you control and what you want to achieve, because there is a reward at the end of it which will give you purpose. Let's go on to the threat state. The threat state is now slightly different. This is where we are tipping over the balance of challenge. The stress response is now extreme. The cortisol and adrenaline is flooding the body and brain, and you are now trying to avoid pain Or face it, fight or flight, but you're trying to survive. You're in that heightened state of focused on the threat and the immediate consequence that this could bring. It's the panic of impending doom. And if you think about this, the reason this state exists, as I explained in the last episode around survival, is 100,000 years ago, we had to be able to spot a predator or a danger and immediately switch on to that threat and get ourselves out of there or prime ourselves to fight. And so that panic of impending doom creates this high stress response, hyper focus, all in a bid to evolutionary deal with the threat. You fast forward to today, though. How many life or death experiences have you actually experienced or been in? Some of us are unfortunate to have actually experienced a few. Many of us haven't. And they're certainly not day to day, are they? So how does a threat state manifest in the modern day world when there isn't an immediate predator or danger posing a threat to our life? Well, again, remember what I said in that first podcast. Our brain's very clever at spotting immediate real danger, but also the perception of what may present a danger to us in the not too distant future. And for many reasons, this perceptional view of threats and danger has gone through the roof in modern day life, primarily because we are exposed to more inputs to our brain today than we ever was before. 70,000, 100,000 years ago, we might have experienced one threat state situation a day, maybe one a week, who knows? But the danger presented itself, we dealt with it, then it subsided and we were back in neutral or challenge. Whereas today, through the information overload, the internet, social media, access to news, the constant rhetoric and narrative that is fed into our brains, the perceptive threat state is happening to people more and more. I'm just going to read an excerpt from my book, Pain and Pleasure, where I talk about this as an example of the modern day threat state. You find a lump of skin, and 2 Google searches later, you're self-diagnosed with cancer. You click on social media, and there's breaking news of climate change, conflict, shootings, disease, recession, and corruption. You're happily watching videos of cats playing on your phone, yet within 3 clicks, you stumble across something violent or pornographic. Your smartwatch tells you for the 57th day in a row that your BMI is high, resting heart rate is suboptimal, and you're not getting enough sleep. Your WhatsApp is pinging like crazy with conflict and drama kicking off on the Friends WhatsApp group. Scientists have discovered that almost every product in your bathroom cabinet may cause cancer. Your energy provider messages you to say your gas and electric bill is increasing for the 3rd quarter in a row. Sugar is bad for you. Meat is bad for you. Carbs are bad for you. Fat is bad for you. Gluten is bad for you. Dairy is bad for you. Illegal immigration is overwhelming our social services. The NHS is doomed and people are dying in corridors. Smoking kills. Vaping is the healthier alternative. Then the government bans vapes over emerging concerns. A meteor the size of New York is heading straight for Earth. Caffeine is bad for you. Too much fruit is bad for you. We are on the cusp of World War III. That's just an example of the modern day inputs into a human being's brain. And you're consuming this while sat what should be neutral state in the comfort of your own home. And within 5 clicks or within a few hours of that, you are in a threat state. Because if you're already susceptible to that survival instinct to protect yourself and the tribe, this type of stuff is sending you spiraling into a threat state. So just because we don't experience day-to-day true and real life-threatening situations doesn't mean to say that we aren't experiencing more threat state than ever. And so the 3 psychological states are really important to understand. I'll summarize this episode by this. What do you do with this information? It's about finding your balance. Because every human being is different. And from working with different human beings, what I've found is that the right mix of neutral, challenge, and threat is not the same for me as it would be for you. Depending on how you're wired, how you're motivated, your personality type, introversion, extroversion, your circumstance in life, everybody is different. However, we was never, ever designed and never evolved to stay in one state for a long duration of time. We have evolved by being able to switch between our states accordingly and find the balance. For me personally, I do best in life when I have a healthy level of challenge state. I have to be in a challenge state probably more than most human beings. I need challenge state weekly, daily. I need to have something to aim at. I need that healthy level of pressure and stress. I want to be overcoming challenges, taking on endeavors, and achieving outcomes. However, even for me, I need to be able to retract to my neutral state when required. I need a healthy amount of neutral state to bring my system down and not become overwhelmed. And that switch between neutral state and lots of challenge means that when the threat state does arrive for me, I'm resilient enough and I built up the tools to be able to deal with it. So I do okay in threat state. Too much time in neutral state for me is my anxiety inducing time. If I'm sat doing nothing and I'm in neutral without any challenge in my life, I go out my mind. My wife will vouch for 10 days into a 14-day holiday. I am tapping. Can't wait to get back and get at it. She thinks it's sad, which it probably is, but it's because I'm not experiencing enough challenge state, which is my balance. For other people, you might be sat there thinking, that sounds too fast-paced and challenging for me. I like to be in my neutral state 50-60% of the time, and I'll push into challenge, but it has to be a few times a week or a couple of times a month, and it has to be not too far out my comfort zone. And other people might be saying, yeah, I'm probably seesawing between challenge and threat state. I've got no neutral state time in my life whatsoever, and I wonder why I'm living off caffeine. I struggle with sleep and I'm burnt out. Whatever your situation is, what I want you to take from this is balance. You need to be able to push into challenge state, which is where you will grow, develop, build confidence and competence. You need to then be able to retract to your neutral state, which says, there's certain periods of time that I need to rest, recharge when I'm awake, and I need to enter that DMN and have periods of reflection, of thought, think about memories, ideas, the future, and visualization. And when we do encounter a threat state or what might be a perceived threat state, we need to be equipped to deal with it. We need to build up that resilience level to deal with it. And getting the right balance between neutral and challenge will give you the tools to do so. And if you are in this perpetuating cycle of threat state through, to a psychological issue, a mental health challenge, or you've just gone too far that you can't get yourself out of it, then there's lots of support out there of how we can sort of rein that back and get you back on an even keel. But the three psychological states are neutral state, challenge state, and threat state. Through our evolutionary need to fulfill our three core functions of survival, reproduction, and purpose, we flick between these states constantly. The key is balance, and the key is to recognize what your balance is and either dial up a bit of challenge state or dial that back and enter a little bit and make time for a little bit more neutral state. You can find out more about this in I Am Human Pain and Pleasure, and I'm sure we've spoke about it on many other podcasts as well. But for now, I'll leave you with that. There's a lot in there, and I'll be back shortly with another Leader Lounge episode.
The Leader Lounge with Martin Johnson, brought to you by T2.